battles.
Do you think that the U.S. or UN forces should have moved into Baghdad?
No.
Why not?
Because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we would have been all alone. There wouldn't have been anybody else with us. It would have been a U.S. occupation of Iraq. None of the Arab forces that were willing to fight with us in Kuwait were willing to invade Iraq. Once you got to Iraq and took it over and took down Saddam Hussein's government, then what are you going to put in its place? That's a very volatile part of the world, and if you take down the central government in Iraq, you can easily end up seeing pieces of Iraq fly off. Part of it the Syrians would like to have to the west. Part of eastern Iraq the Iranians would like to claim, fought over for 8 years. In the north, you've got the Kurds, and if the Kurds spin loose and join with the Kurds in Turkey, then you threaten the territorial integrity of Turkey. It's a quagmire if you go that far and try to take over Iraq. The other thing was casualties. Everyone was impressed with the fact that we were able to do our job with as few casualties as we had. But for the 146 Americans killed in action and for their families, it wasn't a cheap war. And the question for the president, in terms of whether or not we went on to Baghdad and took additional casualties in an effort to get Saddam Hussein, was how many additional dead Americans is Saddam worth? And our judgment was not very many, and I think we got it right.
The vice president would become the chief architect of the war on terror. There would be new laws enhancing executive power, robust action at home and abroad, and above all, secrecy.
The dark side, if you will. We want to spend time in the shadows in the intelligence world. A lot of what needs to be done here will have to be done quietly, without any discussion, using sources and methods that are available to our intelligence agencies.
But you've had a lot of Republican defections on Iraq as well. Just today, just a few minutes ago, Vanity Fair magazine reported that Richard Pearl and Ken Edelman, two of the strongest early supporters of the war, say that now they would not have supported the invasion if they knew how incompetent the administration would be in handling it. Listen to Ken Edelman. He called your administration among the most incompetent administrations in the post-war era. Individually, each team member had serious flaws. Together, they were deadly dysfunctional.
Well, I haven't seen the piece. I'm not going to comment on George.
But Richard Pearl and Ken Edelman were two of the strongest supporters of the administration.
Well, I think there's no question but what it's a tough war, but it's also the right thing to do. And it's very important we complete the mission. I just fundamentally disagree.
So will the vote on Tuesday have any effect on the president's Iraq policy?
I think it'll have some effect perhaps in the Congress, but the president's made clear what his objective is. It's victory in Iraq. And it's full speed ahead on that basis, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Both you and Secretary Rumsfeld have such deep experience in the government, in the House, as White House Chiefs of Staff, as Pentagon Secretaries, now you as Vice President. How do you explain the failure to anticipate more of these problems, the failure to prepare for them?
Well, George, I don't buy the analysis, basically. I think clearly there have been problems. There always are in any war. The change always begins immediately as soon as you launch into conflict. And this one's clearly no different than that. But I think, again, I come back to the basic proposition. I think we've got the basic strategy right. That is, the Iraqis have to ultimately take responsibility for their own fate, both militarily as well as from a political standpoint. That's the strategy. Our objective is victory, and that's the road we're walking down.
You've been talking a lot about the consequences.
Press may not like it. It may be controversial. There'll be politicians who want to argue against it, and it may not be popular.
Seems like the public is turned against it right now.
It may not be popular with the public. It doesn't matter in the sense that we have to continue the mission and do what we think is right, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're not running for office. We're doing what we think is right.
I, Richard Cheney, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God.
Biological and nuclear weapons. Death on a massive scale. He is using his procurement system to acquire the equipment he needs in order to enrich uranium to build a nuclear weapon. Continuing chemical and biological weapons research tells us that he is, in fact, actively and aggressively seeking to acquire nuclear weapons. Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
Vice President Richard B. Cheney, in violation of his constitutional duty, has purposely manipulated the intelligence process to deceive the citizens and the Congress of the United States.
There clearly was a relationship in Iraq on the one hand and the Al-Qaeda organization on the other. It's been testified to. The evidence is overwhelming. That there have been a number of contacts over the years. We've seen in connection with the hijackers, of course, Mohammed Atta. High-level contacts between Osama bin Laden and Iraqi intelligence officials.
Vice President Richard B. Cheney, in violation of his constitutional duty, has purposely manipulated the intelligence process to deceive the citizens and the Congress of the United States.
We'll stand with others to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear weapons and dominating this region.
Iran, astride the world supply of oil, prepared to use terrorist organizations for their nuclear weapons to threaten their neighbors. It's important that not happen.
Is there realistically a military solution to that?
We haven't taken any options off the table.
We'll stand with others to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear weapons and dominating this region.
Vice President Richard B. Cheney, in violation of his constitutional duty, has openly threatened aggression against the Republic of Iran.